She didn't say goodbye. No kiss, no hug, not even that fake smile she uses when we're around other people. Just grabbed her designer luggage, phone already glued to her hand, sunglasses on even though we were inside the house, and said she'd be back in a few days. I asked if she was sure about the timing, mentioned the investor meetings we had scheduled for the end of the week. That's when she stopped and gave me this look, this theatrical head tilt thing she does when she thinks she's winning an argument. Stop being so emotional about a work trip. I'm not your property, she said, like she was reading off some empowerment Instagram post meant to gaslight your spouse. I didn't fight back, didn't argue, just said okay and noted it. She left, and something inside me went quiet. Not broken in the way she probably expected, and no dramatic collapse or begging, just resolved. I walked straight to my office and pulled out a leather-bound file I'd prepared years ago, tucked behind old books she never bothered to read. She used to call it my weird retirement stash, whenever she noticed it. Inside was a single page labeled Phase 1 Containment. I made one phone call to a number I hadn't dialed in 4 years. She's in motion. I said. That was it. No drama, just strategy. Within 3 hours, 3 non-disclosure agreements were signed by professionals whose names she wouldn't recognize, and whose silence cost more than her entire department's quarterly budget. Her flight touched down in Dallas at 6:32 p.m. The client she claimed to be meeting was actually in town until next Tuesday. I didn't call to check in or ask for photos. I already knew what was happening. Our joint investment portal showed a password change attempt. Subtle but insulting. Our credit card alert pinged for Hotel Atelier, not the corporate chain her company usually books. This one was more upscale. Dinner for 2, champagne, expensive dessert, late-night room service. I didn't confront her. Instead, I updated the access keys to my holding firm and signed over power of attorney to a man who owed me his entire career. His confirmation came back within an hour with a single sentence at the bottom saying, "About time." That night, I sat by the window and watched her social media slowly fall silent. No check-ins, no story updates, no selfies from rooftop bars. When she hides, she thinks she's being clever. I texted someone I hadn't contacted since college, and his reply came fast with one sentence confirming he's with her. Then I sent just 4 words to a second contact, someone she's met but never bothered to learn the last name of "she's in, move forward." By the next morning, her department head had been offered a private contract elsewhere. The man didn't hesitate to take it. Then that job she kept bragging about was already being quietly moved under a different division. This wasn't about catching her in the act like some amateur, jealous husband. That's entry-level stuff. I didn't need to see him in her bed. I already had him in my portfolio analysis. A mid-level executive, 2 promotions in 5 years, and one very suspicious travel record that intersected with hers like clockwork. She thinks she's playing with emotions, that if she just spins the story right, she can make me look like the jealous husband who couldn't handle a powerful woman. Let her think that. Because she has no idea what she just stepped out of, and even less of a clue about what she's walking back into. She didn't call that night. Not a landed safe text, not a long day, I'll text later. Not even her usual guilt offering of a blurry photo from her overpriced hotel dinner with a passive-aggressive caption like, "Client dinners never end." Just silence, which would have almost been believable if her location hadn't pinged from a boutique hotel 2 hours south of where the actual client's office was located. I watched the little blue dot settle in for the night on a street I recognized, a place we'd once stayed before a winery tour. Romantic and discreet. I closed the tracker app not because I couldn't stomach it, but because I didn't need more confirmation. I already had the receipts. Joint credit card charged at 8:46 p.m. for dinner at Bellamy's. 2 entrees, filet mignon, champagne, dessert. Room service at 11:13 p.m., then nothing except for a little push notification that made me smile. Attempted login failed on our investment dashboard. She tried logging into the portal we use for our family trust. I'd changed the password that morning. She always assumes I move slower than I actually do. Time for her to learn otherwise. I reopened the contingency folder and flipped to the second tab labeled Asset Isolation. My signature was already there from a week ago. All it needed was activation. By 10 p.m., the holding firm's legal counsel received limited power of attorney transfer instructions. They didn't ask questions, just filed, executed, and confirmed. She thinks she's hurting me, like I'm pacing in the kitchen drinking myself sick. waiting for her to come home and lie to my face. Instead, I was reviewing a tax document dated March 3rd, an innocuous signature line she'd scribbled past without reading. One that linked her voting rights to her continued good standing and ethical conduct. I wondered what the audit committee would think of that clause. But we weren't there yet, not officially. For now, it was time to let the shadows do their work. I sent a message to Marcus. He's not a lawyer or a cop or a hired tool. Marcus is a systems man. Used to work for a major bank until we hired him to build fail-safes for our internal intellectual property firewall. The guy you bring in when your cyber asset value outweighs your liquidity. I texted him, she's in, let's move. His reply was a photo of a USB drive on top of a folder labeled Project Ember. She never even knew it existed. See, 3 years ago, I started quietly developing a modular IP structure inside the company. Patents, proprietary code, research data, the high-value stuff, the crown jewels. She mocked it as my little tech bunker, said it was outdated and paranoid, that I was being ridiculous. Now it was my leverage. By midnight, a draft memo had been prepared for the board, not sent yet, just scheduled, dated 2 days from now. Temporary restructuring during leadership review. She still thought she had time, that if she just kept her story clean and her tone confident, she could gaslight me into silence, play the sufferer when the cracks showed, maybe even cry in the kitchen one night and say, I didn't mean for it to happen, we were just lonely. Too late for that. Loneliness didn't change the password. Loneliness didn't fake a GPS location. Loneliness doesn't check into hotels under different names. And her lover? We'll get to him. I already knew who he was. Not just his name, but his role, his career trajectory, his vulnerabilities. He's not her partner in this. He's her liability. She walked out of here thinking she was the storm, but she forgot that some of us build the weather itself. The manila envelope that hit my desk with a soft thud, but it might as well have detonated. Photos were expected. Blurry silhouettes through hotel curtains, matching time-stamped receipts, maybe a hand on her back at the valet stand. All standard private investigator material. But what the investigator laid on top of those photos, that was the real payload. A name typed on a summary sheet. Tyler Mitchell, 34 years old, mid-level operations manager at my own company. Not even in a separate division or different building. He works 2 floors down from my office. He'd attended 3 of our strategic planning sessions over the past year. Once asked me for advice on an MBA program. We shook hands in the hallway. I told him to stay ambitious and keep pushing forward. She met him at a team-building retreat 6 months ago. One I'd skipped because I was in the middle of renegotiating our supplier contracts. I remember her coming home unusually upbeat that weekend, claiming the trust falls and group exercises finally made her team feel like family. Apparently, she took the trust part quite literally. I flipped through the full report carefully. Dinner dates in wine country. A weekend getaway booked under corporate reimbursement for what was labeled a mentorship seminar. One photo showed her laughing in a robe by the patio of a resort suite. He was shirtless in the background, holding 2 mimosas. I'd seen enough. The betrayal wasn't just personal anymore. It was strategic, calculated. Tyler works under her father's oversight, not an official title, but through influence and connections. Her father sits on our advisory board and has for years. Officially, he's retired, but unofficially, he's the shadow that shaped our hiring decisions, partnerships, vendor selections, even which supplies we stocked in conference rooms. So I started digging, not into Tyler initially, because I already had what I needed there, but into the timeline itself. I pulled up my archive of emails, meeting invites, HR memos, internal communications. I searched for Tyler's name and filtered results by month. Hired July 7th, exactly 2 weeks after her father's golf trip to Napa, right near where that resort photo was taken. Interesting timing. I searched again, this time filtering for BCC fields and forwarded messages. Found a handful of internal updates she'd looped to someone off the record. Mass distribution, but not done well. One was routed through her personal email account instead of company servers. Guess whose IP address the login originated from? Her father's ranch property. So let me get this straight and lay it out clearly. She meets Tyler at a company retreat. Her father meets Tyler around the same time. Tyler gets fast-tracked into the company with an unusually quick hiring process. Then she pulls Tyler into another retreat, bills it as mentorship and professional development, and books them a shared suite under a team budget code. This wasn't infidelity in the traditional sense. This was infiltration, corporate maneuvering. And that shifted something fundamental in me. I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I wasn't even angry in the emotional sense. I was calculating, strategic. Because once betrayal crosses into the corporate realm, it becomes chess. And I've been playing this game longer than all of them combined. That night I opened the secure drive where I store compliance drafts and archived HR reports. There was an old report from a former ethics officer flagging Tyler for excessive proximity to a previous female supervisor. It had been dismissed quietly by human resources, specifically on her father's recommendation. I reopened that case file, made copies, documented everything. Then I called my general counsel, not the public-facing one who appears on our organizational chart, but the private one, the attorney who's never appeared in any company directory. "We've got a breach," I said. He didn't ask what kind of breach, just asked a single question. "Do you want isolation or exposure?" I replied simply, "Both." We scheduled a meeting for Thursday morning. Tyler doesn't know it yet, but his security badge will stop working by Friday afternoon. As for her father, well, he's about to learn what happens when the man he underestimated and dismissed builds escape hatches into every corner of the empire. They thought I'd panic when I found out, that I'd fold under pressure or make emotional decisions. But the one mistake you never make in business or in marriage is trying to steal from the man who built the vault and still holds all the combinations. There's a door on the 27th floor she's never walked through, never even asked about. Technically, it's marked on outdated blueprints as a storage annex for archived contracts, old furniture we were supposed to donate and never did. She once joked that it was where ambition goes to die, made some sarcastic comment about corporate waste. She never bothered to ask why a storage room would have biometric access requiring fingerprint and retinal scanning. I placed my thumb on the scanner. The door clicked open, and the silence inside was cathedral-like, almost reverent. No dust, no clutter, no forgotten filing cabinets. Just a long walnut table with a matte finish, no centerpiece, no windows. This room wasn't built for appearances or impressing clients. This room was built for decisions. 3 men were already seated when I entered, each with a black folder positioned in front of them. Legal, financial, and security. These weren't the department heads whose names appear on our website and attend public board meetings. Those are just figureheads, faces for shareholders. These were the ones I hired off the official ledger, the ones whose compensation isn't recorded in our books, but paid through my offshore vault accounts. I sat down at the head of the table and placed a single envelope in the center. "This is the trigger," I said calmly. Legal opened it first without hesitation. Inside was an updated copy of my will, dated 5 months ago, professionally notarized and quietly filed. It established the Harrison Continuity Trust, an irrevocable entity with full proxy control over my shares and voting rights. He nodded slowly, understanding immediately, then slid the document to the financial representative. Inside his folder was the blind trust registration, already funded and legally active. The signature was mine. The timing was crucial, filed exactly 2 weeks after her team-building retreat with Tyler. He raised an eyebrow slightly. "You've been planning this for quite a while." I smiled without humor. "I plan everything, I just hoped I wouldn't have to use it." Finally, security opened his file to review the contents. Inside was a new access protocol starting Thursday morning. All internal floor movement would require retinal scan verification and 2-factor token access. Specific employees, including her, would trigger a passive alert when attempting to enter restricted levels. He added quietly, almost as an afterthought, "The new chair has already been briefed and is on board," and that was the part I'd been waiting to implement. She always assumed I'd sit in that chair until I died, that even if we divorced, she'd somehow inherit the company by osmosis or association, that the company I built from nothing was just one big sentimental scrapbook with cash flow attached. She never once considered that I might have installed a successor years ago, someone positioned to take control when needed. The new trustee is a man she's never met in any capacity. He doesn't appear on our website, doesn't attend public board meetings, doesn't shake hands at company functions. But he's been shadowing me for 3 years, learning every aspect of operations. Call him what you want: executor, successor, ghost director, backup plan. To her, he's a complete stranger. To me, he's the lock I designed and installed long before she ever found the key. I tapped the table firmly. From here on out, I am a symbolic figure only. The trust votes in my place on all matters. Legally, I'm classified as a consultant. Legal nodded again in understanding. And she doesn't know any of this? No, and when she finds out, it'll be too late to challenge legally. Security added his concern. She's going to notice the changes pretty quickly. She can notice whatever she wants, I said. Noticing isn't the same as stopping. The mood in the room didn't shift or become emotional. These men aren't reactive. They've handled estates after political assassinations, managed reverse mergers in hostile international zones, orchestrated asset seizures during divorces that make mine look like a schoolyard breakup. But even they understood this was surgical precision. I didn't need her permission for any of this. I needed her overconfidence and sense of security. She was too busy sipping room service champagne with Tyler to realize that her title had become ceremonial, that her influence was now public relations deep and nothing more. I stood up and buttoned my jacket. Phase 2 begins tomorrow morning. Let her walk back into the office, thinking nothing's changed. Because that's the most effective kind of power, the kind that doesn't announce itself or make threats. It waits patiently. And when it finally moves, it moves like architecture being constructed, deliberate, unstoppable, permanent. She arrived Wednesday evening, dragging her suitcase behind her like some kind of trophy. Still in heels, makeup perfectly untouched, smelling like expensive hotel soap and someone else's cologne. The key clicked in the lock, but there was no scent of dinner cooking, no music playing, no husband sitting with his laptop at the kitchen island, like she'd grown accustomed to. Just silence echoing through the rooms. She dropped the suitcase with a dramatic sigh and waited. Called out babe once, light and casual, performative. No answer from anywhere in the house. She checked the bedroom, found it empty, walked into my study, and found the chair pushed in neatly. Files all cleared away, laptop missing from its usual spot. She stood there for a moment, chewing the inside of her cheek, then scoffed quietly to herself. Probably off sulking somewhere, she likely thought. She'd give me a day or two to pout and get it out of my system, then smooth everything over with some half-truth about exhausting team dinners and how I'm always so suspicious and controlling lately. She went to sleep in the guest room that night. The next morning, she wore her usual power outfit to the office. Tailored cream blouse, hair styled up professionally, expensive pearl earrings. Playing the part of the CEO's wife, power by association and appearance. She breezed past the front desk with a casual nod to security, didn't bother flashing her ID badge like she normally would, then stopped short in her tracks. 2 unfamiliar guards stood positioned in front of the executive elevator. Not the usual rent-a-cops or building security. Real ones, the kind you notice immediately. Ex-military types with sharp suits, wireless earpieces, and expressionless faces that had seen actual combat. She blinked in confusion. "I'm heading up," she said, reaching for the elevator button. One guard raised his hand firmly to stop her. "New security protocol, ma'am." She laughed once, dry and incredulous. "I'm the CEO's wife." They didn't respond, didn't move, didn't acknowledge the statement. She looked at the panel. No light indicator, no floor numbers displayed. The elevator didn't move at all. She pulled out her phone immediately and dialed her father, went straight to voicemail. She texted quickly, "Why are there guards blocking the exec elevator?" 30 seconds later, her father appeared around the corner, walking fast, slightly sweating despite the air conditioning. "Dad, what the hell is going on? Why can't I get upstairs?" He didn't answer her question, just took her elbow firmly like she was a child acting out in public and muttered under his breath, "There's something you need to see right now." She wrenched her arm away from his grip. "Tell me what's happening." His voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Just come upstairs now." The elevator beeped and opened. The guard stepped aside, but only for him. She hesitated, confused and increasingly worried, then followed him inside. As they ascended, she noticed something odd. Her keycard clipped to her bag wasn't scanned at all. Only his badge was. Something was very wrong now. She could feel it, not panic yet, but that low internal static that hums when a system you thought you understood begins to reject you completely. When they reached the 27th floor, the doors opened to a lobby that looked fundamentally altered. New carpet, different artwork on the walls. Even the receptionist desk was completely gone. Her father tried to usher her forward quickly. "Wait!" she snapped, stopping in place. "Where is everyone? Where's my husband?" He didn't answer, just opened the door to the main boardroom and stepped aside. She walked in slowly and froze, not because of who she saw, but because of who she didn't see. Her husband wasn't there at all, but two other men were. One of them, middle-aged with silver hair and sharp, calculating eyes, stood when she entered. He didn't smile, didn't offer his name, didn't extend a hand, just gestured calmly to the seat across from him. She looked at her father desperately. "What is this?" He avoided her eyes completely. The man said calmly and clearly, "There's been a temporary restructuring of leadership. Your husband has taken formal leave. I've been appointed acting trustee of his board seat." "Trustee?" She repeated the word like it was foreign to her. "Yes," he said without emotion. "As outlined in the Harrison Continuity Trust, filed 6 months ago and approved by the board last quarter." She laughed, but it didn't reach her eyes. It sounded hollow. "This is ridiculous. He can't just disappear and appoint some stranger to—" "You're not on the board," the man interrupted gently but firmly. "Your father is not on the board. Neither is Mr. Mitchell." She blinked. "Mr. Mitchell?" "Tyler," he clarified patiently. "Your junior associate. He's under formal review by the ethics committee. Effective immediately." She turned to her father again, but his face had gone blank, defeated. She didn't know it yet, not fully, but the air had shifted fundamentally. This wasn't a misunderstanding or cold shoulder. This was structure, deliberate movement, strategic redirection. And for the first time in years, her footing slipped. Not enough to fall completely, but enough to realize the floor beneath her wasn't hers anymore. The boardroom felt wrong on every level. Her father stood stiffly by the glass wall, arms crossed defensively, face flushed but silent. Tyler, her lover and supposed partner, was seated awkwardly near the end of the table. His jacket was off, tie loosened, all color drained from his face. They both looked at her when she entered, then immediately looked away like guilty children. Then her eyes landed on the man sitting in the power position. Mid-60s, with silver hair, perfectly parted, charcoal gray suit tailored like armor, cufflinks that looked expensive enough to require security clearance. He was completely calm, unbothered, reading from a file with surgical detachment like he was reviewing a grocery list. Her voice snapped before she could think. "Where's my husband?" The man didn't look up immediately. He finished reading his current page, closed the folder with precision, then met her gaze not with aggression, but with the kind of quiet dominance that doesn't need to prove itself. "Not here," he said simply. "I'm acting trustee of the Harrison Holdings seat." She blinked hard. "Trustee?" The man offered a small, almost amused smile. "That's correct. Your husband executed a blind trust directive in April. I was appointed trustee of record. This transition has been legally active for 30 days. She looked desperately at Tyler. Nothing from him. Just that same pale, guilty stillness. She turned to her father, voice rising. "Dad? What the hell is going on?" Her father looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. He opened his mouth, closed it, couldn't form words. The man continued casually, like discussing the weather. "Your father's advisory position was removed in the May realignment. You would have received notice and had your permissions been active." She felt her stomach drop. "My permissions are active. I'm on the board. My name's on every document in this company." "No," the man said simply, setting the folder down carefully. "Your administrative access was provisional from the beginning. Your voting rights were tied to marital good standing and fiduciary compliance per the charter. Both were voided as of last week." It hit her like ice water down the spine. Voided by who? The man didn't blink. "By you, indirectly. Your actions triggered Article 12 of the Ethics Clause in the company charter. You co-signed it during refinancing last fiscal year. Clause 12C specifically. Conflict of interest, cohabitation with subordinate staff members." Tyler stirred and his throat made a faint sound like he wanted to speak, but thought better of it. She wasn't finished. "I want to speak to my husband right now." The man nodded politely. He left specific instructions. "You're welcome to observe this meeting. You are not authorized to speak during official votes. or be present for closed deliberations going forward. This is my company, she hissed through clenched teeth. The man turned a page in the folder calmly. No, it was his company. Now it's the trust's company, and I represent the trust. She moved a step forward on instinct reflex, probably delusion. The man didn't raise his voice, didn't stand up, just said without looking up from his papers. Security is instructed not to intervene unless you attempt to breach restricted access zones. I'd advise against that course of action. Her father sat down heavily in the nearest chair, rubbing his temples like his head was splitting. Tyler wouldn't meet her eyes at all. And she, still in her power heels and fitted silk blouse, still trying to hold the room by force of habit, realized she had walked into something that had been unfolding long before she ever zipped her suitcase. The game wasn't just rigged in his favor. It had already ended. She just hadn't received the final scorecard until this very moment. Her father finally broke the thick silence, voice strained. This has gotten completely out of hand. We need to speak privately. But the man at the head of the table held up one hand. No need for that. Everything's already been reviewed and filed properly. He slid a folder across the smooth walnut table, not aggressively, just firmly, like delivering a verdict. Stopped right in front of her. She hesitated, then opened it with shaking hands. The first page showed voting record analysis and internal stakeholder shifts. The second page was a compliance memo about HR anomalies and suspicious delegation chains. The third page was a photo that made her breath catch. It was her and Tyler at the rooftop bar of Hotel Atelier. She was laughing, leaning in close. He was touching her wrist. Time-stamped clearly. Below it was a short memo from Internal Risk Management. Relationship confirmed via expense patterns, device geolocation data, and unreported overnight lodging claims. Violation of Executive Conduct Protocols, Articles 7A and 7C. Tyler made a choking sound beside her father. She looked at him hard. Did you know they were watching us? He didn't answer, couldn't answer. His face had gone chalk white. One of his hands twitched beneath the table. The trustee spoke calmly without raising his tone. Your husband recused himself from the investigation 2 weeks ago. The ethics review was triggered automatically when Article 7 was violated. Given the timeline and the evidence, no one on this board has the authority to override that process. She felt her world tilting. You mean I'm being formally investigated? As of this morning, yes, the chairman confirmed. And I'm being suspended? The trustee nodded once. Pending the full results. During this period, your office access will be revoked. Your company credentials will remain inactive. You may submit a formal statement for review. Legal counsel is permitted. She turned slowly to her father, voice cracking now. Dad? He didn't move, didn't speak, just rubbed the bridge of his nose and stared at the tabletop like it held answers. Dad, say something, she hissed desperately. Finally, he looked up. And in that one glance, tired, resigned, 1,000-yard corporate stare, she saw what she didn't want to believe. He knew. Not everything, perhaps, but enough. He had known Tyler's name, knew about the whispers around the office, knew about the conflicts of interest. And he had chosen silence until it was no longer an option, until the exposure threatened him too. Because now it wasn't about protecting family. It was about protecting his own legacy, what little remained of it. He wasn't sitting here as her father. He was here to contain damage to himself. She looked around the room and saw what had fundamentally changed. These men, these suits, these corporate chess masters, once her husband's allies and then hers by extension through marriage, were no longer offering her nods or smiles or polite fictions. They looked at her like an acquisition gone toxic, something you quarantine and isolate before it infects the rest of the system. Tyler tried to mumble something, maybe an apology, but she cut him off with a glare. Too late for that now. She was alone. Not physically, there were bodies everywhere in this room, but alone in the worst possible way. The system she thought she understood, the one she believed bent to charm and pressure and her last name, had turned to granite beneath her feet. No amount of pleading, positioning, or posturing would change the reality now. She stormed out of the boardroom before anyone officially dismissed her. Didn't wait for protocol, didn't sign the ethics notice sitting on the table, didn't make eye contact with anyone. Her heels echoed like bangs across the marble floor. Her father didn't follow her. Neither did Tyler. Back in her office, technically still hers for another 12 hours according to the termination policy, she slammed the door and locked it. She yanked her phone from her purse with shaking hands. Called HR directly. No answer, just automated voicemail. PR forwarded her call immediately to voicemail. Legal sent an auto response. Please direct all ethics-related inquiries to the Compliance Liaison Office. She threw the phone onto her desk. It bounced once, landed screen up, started buzzing immediately. New notification in her inbox. Subject line alone made her breath hitch. Leadership transition and organizational integrity. She opened it slowly, dread building. An official communication from Harrison Holdings Shareholder Relations. Polished header, embedded company seal, professional formatting, and then the photo that hit her like a physical slap. Her husband, smiling faintly with that signature quiet confidence, arms crossed in his power pose, standing next to the new acting chair she'd just met. The caption read, Founder's Vision, Sustained Transition Built on Legacy. Her eyes darted down the page frantically. The message followed, crafted in perfect corporate PR language. Effective immediately, the Harrison Continuity Trust has executed a leadership realignment in accordance with Article 9 of the Founders Agreement. This change, aligned with industry best governance practices, ensures organizational stability, ethical leadership standards, and long-term asset protection. It was clean, legal, completely unapologetic. But the kicker, the detail that made her stomach turn, was the timestamp. Scheduled send Saturday 9:04 a.m., 3 days ago. Before her return flight, before the elevator humiliation, before the boardroom folder and evidence, before any of it became public, before she even knew she'd been caught. She scrolled to the bottom desperately, hoping for some sign that this was reactive, some last-minute scramble to contain chaos. But instead, she saw email tracking data, delivered to all shareholder recipients, opened by 92% within 30 minutes of receipt, top engagement location, Executive Investor Suite, level 28. They had already celebrated her removal. She wasn't even an afterthought in their transition party, just a final delivery notification on a campaign that had been in motion for months. Her hands started shaking, not from sadness or shame, but from the brutal realization that she'd been playing checkers in a room full of chess grandmasters. And the game had ended before she'd even stepped onto the board. She yanked her laptop from its docking station, opened Slack desperately. Her team channel showed as archived. Executive Communications Group deleted entirely. Her permissions revoked across every platform. She tried to access her server drive. Access denied. Tried her personal cloud backup. Blocked. She stared at the screen, blinking in disbelief, then noticed something in the upper right corner of the email window. Sent to all shareholders at Harrison Trust. Below that, delivered 4:03 p.m. Her name was at the absolute bottom of the recipient list. She was the last person to receive it. That wasn't an accident or a system glitch. It was punctuation, a final statement. The man who once waited up for her to get home safely had scheduled her public irrelevance before she even landed, and made absolutely certain she felt it down to the second. She sat back in her chair, the same one she'd once bragged about furnishing with imported Italian leather. It squeaked slightly under her weight, the only sound in a space that had already stopped recognizing her voice or her authority. She tore through the bottom drawer of her home filing cabinet that night like it held the key to salvation. Legal folders spilled out across the floor, past tax returns, renovation permits, that glossy welcome packet from the overpriced Napa retreat she'd dragged him to last year. None of it mattered now. Somewhere in here, buried beneath years of marital bureaucracy and corporate vanity, was the only thing she was still desperately clinging to. Leverage, proof, something she could wave in someone's face and say, "This wasn't legal. He tricked me. Undo it all." She flipped through contracts frantically, yanking paper after paper from their plastic sleeves with shaking hands. And then she found it. Equity Transfer Agreement. Schedule B addendum from the refinancing package last year. The one he'd framed as routine adjustment before the new fiscal cycle. She'd barely glanced at it back then, skimmed the summary page. He handled all the financial details. She remembered asking one question about her retained voting shares, and he'd smiled calmly, reassuringly. "It just locks everything into place legally." Nothing changes unless something really extreme happens, he'd said. And she, balancing a mimosa in one hand and a calendar invite in the other, had signed without reading the fine print. Now she saw it clearly for the first time. Clause 6C in smaller print, tucked beneath innocuous subclauses, about dividend schedules and founder rights. In the event of a verified breach of marital fidelity or fiduciary duty, all voting shares transferred to spouse shall immediately revert to the founder. This clause is irrevocable, binding, and not subject to discretionary appeal. Her initials were neat beside it. Her signature looped elegantly across the bottom. Date time-stamped and notarized by a witness. Her hand dropped the page like it had burned her fingers. She staggered back and sat on the cold tile floor, folders still scattered open around her like evidence of her own destruction. The silence in the house suddenly felt surgical, precise, as if it had been patiently waiting for her to discover just how deeply cornered she really was. This wasn't a trap hastily built in rage or emotional revenge. This was architecture, engineering, months or maybe years in the making. She'd mocked his caution repeatedly, laughed at his disaster prep folders and his obsession with legal structure and documentation, called him paranoid when he used encrypted storage for board documents, rolled her eyes dramatically when he insisted on double-authenticated logins for estate planning systems. And while she'd been busy treating him like a doormat with a wedding ring, he had been methodically building fail-safes, triggers, legal fuses designed to detonate, not to protect himself from random chaos or bad luck, to protect himself from her specifically. She stared at the contract on the floor, her chest tight, not from fear this time, but sharp embarrassment. He had known. Maybe not the exact affair, not the names or dates, but he had expected something. Not like a jealous husband, but like an executive guarding what belonged to him. And she had basically handed him the switch herself, signing papers with one hand while holding a glass of orange juice in the other, too distracted to notice what she was giving away. He planned this, she whispered into the quiet. The truth hit her hard, like being betrayed all over again. But this time, she had done it to herself. Every move she'd made, every smug look she tossed Tyler across that hotel room, every time she bragged that her husband would never have the guts to leave her, it had all been allowed, observed, tracked. He hadn't needed to chase her with fights or accusations. He only needed her to keep going, to dig herself deeper. Suddenly, everything made sense. The photo permissions, the perfect timing of the leadership change, the trustee appointment, all filed weeks before. And this contract she had signed, this wasn't a backup plan. It was the bomb itself. And she had signed it with her own hand. She didn't sleep that night. She sat on the living room floor until sunrise, buried in piles of papers, contracts, screenshots, printed emails, her little arsenal of proof, now nothing more than a graveyard she had built for herself. At 6:43 a.m., she finally stood, showered, and dressed. No soft tones, no polished corporate blouse. She put on a sharp black dress with harsh lines, something that felt like armor. If they wanted a show, she'd give them one last act. She drove fast, parked in a spot meant for someone important, and stormed past a reception. The same two guards waited by the executive elevator. They didn't stop her. They didn't even look at her. She didn't slow down. This time, they didn't block her. The elevator opened, empty, ready. Her reflection in the mirrored doors didn't look like a woman who had lost everything. She looked like someone ready to claw her way back no matter the cost. The executive floor was quiet, too quiet. No assistants rushing around, no phones, no chatter. The boardroom door was slightly open. Her father sat near the far end of the table. Tyler was next to him, hands tight in his lap, his leg bouncing with nerves. Neither man looked at her. She walked in, and there he was, her husband, sitting at the head of the table. Calm, present, hands folded, eyes steady, completely relaxed, like this was just another Thursday morning meeting. She opened her mouth, and a flood of words pushed up. Accusations, legal warnings, maybe even one last plea to the man she thought still cared. But before she said anything, he spoke. Welcome back. No anger, no sarcasm, just simple acknowledgement. You may observe today's meeting, he added, nodding toward the row of chairs set up for people without voting rights. Then, firm and final, you don't have a seat at this table. Her lungs froze. It wasn't cruel, it wasn't loud, it was just the truth. She looked at her father. Nothing. No reaction, no support. Tyler was sweating hard now, jaw locked, staring at the table like it might save him. She stepped forward. The door clicked shut behind her. No one turned, no one paused. To them, she wasn't part of the process anymore. She was just someone watching from the sidelines. She walked to the edge of the room and sat in a chair that wasn't meant for her. The trustee entered through a side door, nodded to her husband, and began reading from a typed agenda. Compliance update, legacy asset migration, vote on new board appointments. Each line felt like another nail sealing a door she would never open again. She stared at her husband, the man she had written off as dull, soft, weak, the man she thought she could manipulate with charm, quiet seduction, and well-timed silence. And he didn't even glance her way. He stayed steady in the structure he'd built so carefully, brick by legal brick. She was breathing, but it felt like drowning. Because in this place, where her last name used to open every door, where she once spoke like someone untouchable, she was now just another person sitting in a chair that wasn't hers. She had assumed his silence meant fear or heartbreak, that he was too soft to fight. But now she saw the truth. His silence had been the sound of plans being put in place, of documents being signed, of control shifting piece by piece. It was the sound of a strategy reaching its final move. And she was nothing more than a piece already removed from the board. The meeting rolled on without her like she wasn't even there. And maybe that was the point. She walked out thinking she had power. But power isn't handed down by family or charm. Power is built, guarded, and, when needed, used like a weapon. And while she'd been busy tearing down her own foundation, he had been quietly building his fortress,